In my previous video, I talked about how you can view your fitness and the process of creating a healthier lifestyle around phases of progression. And so in this video, I want to talk about how in that first foundational phase, you can improve some of those topics that I briefly discussed in the last video. And I'm Travis. I've been helping people build physical and mental strength for the past 10 years as a personal trainer and a doctor of physical therapy, because I believe that fitness is the perfect vehicle for personal development that essentially permeates all aspects of your life. I want to start with something that's often overlooked, but what I think is the most important part of this journey, and for any new pursuit that you're undertaking in any aspect of your life as well. And especially if it's the things that you have big goals for, or things that you've never attempted, and even things that you've attempted in the past, but have failed multiple times before, and now you're starting again. And starting with the why is going to give you the most motivation that's going to last throughout this whole process, because it's not going to be easy. And especially if it's something that you've never achieved before, or it's a bigger goal, you know it's going to be even harder, which means it's going to take even longer. And now the longer that time span is going to give you the most opportunities to drop off, because naturally our motivation is going to go in ebbs and flows. And so the more ebbs you have along that process, the more opportunities you're going to have to be in a situation where your motivation is low, you're tired, and that little voice starts creeping in that's saying, you can just stop now and all the pain will be gone. But when you dig really deep into your why, the pain of not achieving it is going to be greater than the pain, or the momentary pain, of having to get up and go to the gym, or having to do the thing that you don't really want to do, that you're not used to doing because your habits have been in the complete opposite direction, where when you get home from work and you're used to sitting on the couch and watching TV and just relaxing for the rest of your evening, and now maybe you have to think a little bit more about preparing your meals or cooking your meals, or like I said, getting up and going to the gym, or maybe reading a book or journaling a little bit, meditating, going to yoga, whatever the case may be, whatever it is that you're working on to transform your physical and mental health, it's not going to be easy, and it's going to be painful because you're breaking these old habits. And so I believe it was Viktor Frankl who said, a strong enough why can withstand any how, which goes back to everything that I was just saying, of the hows of, now I have to do this task that I'm going to exert even more energy towards, that I don't feel like I have. So when you really take a lot of time to either write down or think more deeply on what the true motivation is for why you're doing what you're doing, it doesn't make it any less painful, but it keeps you on track. Because at the end of the day, consistency is the key. The longer you're in the game, the better your chances are of winning. And the only way you fail is if you quit. So having that strong why will keep you in the game long enough for you to win. Next thing I want to talk about is setting expectations properly, which is going to be really important, because the worst thing that you can do is think that it's going to be easier than it really is, and assuming that you're going to get results in a much quicker time than is probably going to happen, or than is realistic or probable. And aside from that, is if that is the case and you start doing certain things to get those results as quickly as possible, most of the time those aren't very stable long term, especially when you think about these yo-yo diets that people go on, or these fad diets that involve a lot of unhealthy practices to get to a certain number. And the funny part about it is, eventually, when that is unsustainable and you go back to your normal way of living and eating, the weight comes back, and in some cases you actually gain more weight because of the adverse reactions from your metabolism and your body's attempt to deal with all of these changes that you made in such a drastic way. And so one of the things that I like to do personally, and one of the things I like to do with the people that I'm working with, is whatever time frame we can reasonably predict that it'll take, add more time to it. Maybe not double it, but play as long of a game as possible, because when you already tell yourself that it's going to take a year, let's say, and again, this is, well, depending on your goals, that could be reasonable, but whatever the reasonable amount of time is that you would think based on how much weight you want to lose or how much weight you want to gain or vice versa, whatever it is that you desire, add more time to it by months. Because when you think on the upper end of the timeline, essentially you can relax into the patience of it. So when you say, I'm not even going to worry about where I am for 6 months, and then when I get to 6 months and I don't feel like I'm on track or progressing as quickly than I want to be, that's when you can really start to reevaluate and hone in on certain parts of your routine to allow those results to come a little bit more quickly. But really, up until that point, the most important thing that you can focus on is building better habits and creating better routines around the types of, and I'll say skills because they are something that you're working on developing, the skills around your daily routine that once you get better at them, you have more control of tweaking this or that. So and I'll say if those results aren't coming as quickly as you would want, you have a really good hold on your behaviors so that you can change them and manipulate them to now allow the results to come a little bit more quickly. But up until that point, the long-term results are not as important as what are you doing on a daily basis. So now getting into the implementation of certain behaviors or habits that'll really help set a good basis for all these other changes that you're making. One of them is going to be sleep. So getting a hold of your sleep routine so that you can maximize not only how many hours you are asleep, but how deep and how restful those hours are. And so shooting for 7 to 8 hours is a great place to start. But on top of that, if you have an ability to track your sleep, whether you have a wearable device like a Fitbit or an Apple Watch that tells you the different phases of sleep you're in, how long you're actually awake versus how often you're not in sleep, but you're still laying in bed. I mean, a lot of times it's kind of hard to tell, but with those devices, you can really see how deeply you are or how often throughout the night you actually do wake up, which takes some time to fall back asleep as well. But some tips or strategies that are helpful in terms of maximizing this ability to not only go to sleep but stay asleep is to create better associations around your evening routine, or specifically your bedroom and your bed, which is, are you creating an association between your bed and being on your phone, or your bed and watching TV? So these things that are contradictory to you actually being in a relaxed, restful state that is more conducive to falling asleep rather than being in still a relaxed state because you're laying in bed, but now your mind is active because you're watching TV or you're scrolling on your phone or whatever the case may be. So the more often you create the association of when you're in bed, it's time to go to sleep, and minimizing as many distractions as possible will help, as well as being consistent with the timing. Even on the weekends, are you waking up around the same time, or are you sleeping in much later and going to bed much later on the weekends? Again, versus trying to stay pretty consistent with the time you're trying to go to sleep and the time you're waking up, regardless of whether it's a weekday or weekend, will really help starting to train your body and your mind to know that at a certain time in at a certain place, your bed, once I'm there, then it's time to go to sleep. And through an intentional process of creating stronger associations between evening time and bedtime and sleep should help fall into a more comfortable routine that is more consistent as well. And lastly, it's important to bring an awareness around how hydrated you are and the water consumption on a daily basis. Because if nearly 70% of our body and brain is made up of water, then obviously not having enough of that is going to have a detrimental effect on the way our body and brain functions as well. And it's even going to help with things like mental clarity and energy levels, which, going along the previous topic of sleep, is going to help throughout this process, because when you do have those periods of low energy and low motivation, that can be compounded by being more dehydrated and having little sleep. Again, going back to my previous point of times when you have negative motivation, if that negative motivation is stronger, then your desire to quit is going to be higher. So not maximizing sleep, not maximizing hydration will make the negative motivation greater during periods of discomfort and already when you're already fatigued. And so even on a much more practical and simpler note, the more water that you drink means that you're taking away opportunities to be drinking calories or other nutrients that may also be counterproductive to your goals. So just by this simple switch and the substituting of one liquid for another, you can be more in line with your goals and also help with the motivation and the energy levels at the same time. And another way I like viewing water, especially as a universal solvent, is the same way you might clean and mop your floors. And in order to clean that mop, you're going to rinse it in water. And you could see all the dirt and all the grime and all the nasty, bad stuff that you just picked up on the floor. Water is going to be the thing that washes it all away. And so when you think about that same thing internally, the more water that you have ingesting and flushing through your system, the more you're getting rid of all those toxins and impurities that have built up through the natural chemical reactions and metabolism from everything that we're ingesting. And we want to give our body enough of that universal solvent to now take up those impurities and get rid of them and excrete them from our body. And so I hope these tips and ideas have been helpful in shifting your mindset and the way you perceive creating a healthier lifestyle and going about it in a slower pace, because the ultimate goal is adopting these new behaviors and habits for years to come. And if you made it this far, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.